The plasma blast tore through Bruce's back, searing flesh and bone, dropping him face first into the blood-soaked mud of Azati Prime. Sizzling skin and muscle sloughed off as he reached for the terrified Xindi child cowering behind rubble. Bruce shielding her with his failing body as Xindi soldiers stormed their position. Plasma rifles leveled at the dying human's head, fingers twitching on triggers. The girl's scream cut through the chaos, begging, pleading. Bruce's blood stained her arms as she clutched him, his breath rattling, fading. Raxor stared in disbelief at the charred mass of ruptured organs and tissue on his operating table, the barely living remains of the human called Bruce. No one could survive such wounds. Raxor had seen thousands die from far less. But Bruce's heart beat on. His one remaining lung continued to draw ragged breaths. Impossible. Raxor and his surgical team worked to salvage the unsalvageable, more out of morbid curiosity than hope. The human's agony during the grueling 18-hour operation defied description. By all rights, the pain alone should have killed him. And yet Bruce clung to life, his vitals shockingly, infuriatingly stable. What kept him alive, Raxor couldn't begin to fathom. But he needed to understand. Had the Xindi so grossly underestimated human fortitude? More barely living human soldiers arrived in the following days, horrifically maimed and clinging to life. Raxor pushed his team to their limits to keep them alive. Humans who should die in minutes endured for days, recovering from mortal wounds through nothing but biological stubbornness and force of will that astounded the Xindi. Watching human after human cheat death forced Raxor to a grim conclusion. The Xindi were doomed if humanity could survive wounds that would kill a Xindi twice over without effort. How could they hope to win a war against such monsters? Doubt knotted in Raxor's stomach. If they continued on this path, mutually assured destruction awaited them all. There had to be another way, an alternative to annihilation. And the key to that epiphany lay before him, in the inexplicably alive body of a human named Bruce. Raxor stared at Bruce's sleeping form, the steady rise and fall of his chest, a testament to the human's incredible resilience. 3 weeks had passed since the soldier arrived more dead than alive on Raxor's operating table. His recovery defied explanation. Raxor checked the intravenous lines, adjusted the nutrient flow. Human biochemistry still baffled him, despite long hours poring over scans and samples. Their ability to endure, to will themselves back from the precipice of death, both fascinated and unnerved him. Bruce stirred, eyelids fluttering open. He tried to speak, but his throat, ravaged from intubation, produced only a raspy croak. Raxor held up a placating hand. "Do not try to talk. Your larynx is still healing." He offered Bruce a sip of water from a straw, studied his patient's reaction closely. Sunken eyes focused on Raxor, wary yet lucid. Bruce's gaze flicked to the Xindi script on Raxor's tunic. He gestured weakly to his own chest, tapped twice over his heart. A hoarse whisper, "Thank you." The words, the sentiment behind them, caught Raxor off guard. This man, this human, had no reason to thank him. Raxor was Xindi, the enemy. How many of Bruce's comrades had died at Xindi hands? "Thanks are unnecessary," Raxor replied stiffly. "I am a doctor. I treat those in need." The words felt hollow in his mouth. He thought of the orders from high command, mandates to prioritize Xindi wounded over the enemy at all costs. Each human he pulled back from the brink directly defied those directives. Bruce studied his face, a flicker of something. Understanding, gratitude, respect, passing across battered features. "More than that," he rasped. "You're brave, going against your own, choosing compassion." He touched a finger to his temple, then his heart. The content of character. Raxor felt an unfamiliar tightness in his throat. Before he could respond, Bruce's eyes drooped closed, exhaustion overtaking him. But his words hung in the air, resonating in Raxor's mind. Was it bravery or foolishness to cling so stubbornly to his principles? He didn't know anymore. Days turned to weeks in the hospital ward as more mangled humans arrived, each clinging to life with the same ferocious tenacity Raxor had come to expect. He and his team worked tirelessly, pushing Xindi medicine to its limits to keep them alive. And slowly, through the pain and blood and long hours, something shifted. Fragments of halting conversation over treatment beds turned to longer talks, hesitant questions giving way to shared stories, tales of families, of homes, of hopes for when the guns finally fell silent. These humans were not the savage animals Xindi doctrine painted them as. They were soldiers, yes, killers even. But they were also fathers and sons, dreamers and idealists. Each had a story, a reason they fought so hard to survive. For some it was loved ones waiting back on distant Earth. For others, a bone-deep belief in their cause. And for a few, like Bruce, it was something more ephemeral. A fundamental faith in the strength of the human spirit. Through Bruce, Raxer gained a window into the human psyche. Long talks in the quiet hours revealed a species driven by passion, by an almost reckless belief in the value of life and the power of unity. Many different peoples, all united, Bruce told him one evening, voice still raspy from healing tissues. That's humanity's strength. We join together, find common cause, make the whole greater than the parts. His eyes took on a distant cast, seeing something far beyond the hospital walls. You Xindi could have that too, if you looked beyond divisions, found a way to come together. Raxer considered this as he worked, mulling the implications. The Xindi segregated themselves by subspecies, each holding themselves above the others. They valued uniformity, conformity, obedience to the state overall. Was that a weakness rather than a strength? Had their rigid castes and stratified society made them vulnerable? Word of the unorthodox goings-on in Raxer's hospital reached Xindi command. Colonel Varric, coldly furious, descended on the facility with orders to shut it down. He found Raxer in the midst of emergency surgery, wrist deep in a human soldier's gutted abdomen. "Explain yourself, doctor," Varric snarled, eyes flashing with disdain at the sight of Raxer saving an enemy life. "You were ordered to treat Xindi only. Why are you wasting resources on these human filth?" Raxer met Varric's glare steadily, hands never stopping their delicate work. "I am a doctor," he repeated as he had so many times before. "I treat those in need. Human, Xindi, it makes no difference." "It makes all the difference," Varric roared. "They are the enemy, savages fit only for extermination." "No." The certainty in Raxer's voice surprised even him. "They are not what we believed. They are more. If we could look past our preconceptions, see them as they truly are, we could learn much." Varric gaped at him, scales flaring in fury and disbelief. "You would betray your own kind for them? Sympathize with those who slaughter our people?" His hand fell to the plasma pistol at his hip. Raxer shook his head sadly. "It is no betrayal to recognize the truth. We have been wrong about humanity. They are not our inferiors. In some ways, they may even be our betters. If we could see that, this war would have no purpose." "Purpose? The purpose is survival. They would wipe us out if they could." Varric's eyes blazed with zealous hate. "I do not believe that. They merely want to live free of fear, as do we. If we laid down arms, sought understanding, there could be peace." Even as he spoke the words, Raxer knew it was futile. Varric was too far gone, too poisoned by doctrine. The colonel tensed, clawed fingers wrapping around his sidearm. Raxer braced for the shot, for an ignominious end over an alien operating table. But it never came. A tremor shook the building, followed by a deep boom that rattled instruments on trays. Then another, closer, loud enough to make ears ring. Shouts erupted outside, Xindi voices raised in alarm, the thrum of plasma rifles powering up. Varric spun to the door, pistol drawn. Beyond, the sounds of chaos grew. Screams, weapons fire, explosions crumping in staccato cadence, the pop and sizzle of energy beams. Recognition dawned in Varric's eyes. A raid. He turned back to Raxor, lips curled in a snarl. "This is on your head. Because of you and your perversion, we are vulnerable." He jabbed a clawed finger. "I should execute you for treason, but let the humans have you, if you love them so much." With that, he turned on his heel and stormed out. Raxor stared after him, heart pounding. Varek's words echoed in his mind even as the battle sounds intensified. Was the man right? Had Raxor doomed them all with his compassion? No, he couldn't believe that. Even if the humans took the hospital, even if they struck down every Xindi here, that changed nothing. What Raxor had learned went beyond this single battle. It was about the future, about two peoples, fundamentally more alike than they cared to admit. If they could see that, if they could set aside generations of enmity, what might they achieve together? With a deep breath, Raxor turned back to his patient. Human or Xindi, it mattered not. A life was a life. He would do his duty, render aid to any who needed it. Let the soldiers wage their war. He chose a different path. He caught a glimpse of movement at the ward door and looked up, expecting Varek returning with reinforcements to drag him away. But it wasn't Xindi at the threshold. It was Bruce, battered and bandaged, leaning heavily on the doorframe. A plasma rifle dangled from his other hand. The human's eyes found Raxor's, held them. A heartbeat passed, two as they stared at each other across the carnage of the operating theater. Slowly, Bruce straightened, lifted the rifle. For a sickening instant, Raxor thought it would be leveled at him, that his human friend would prove Varek right. But Bruce didn't raise the weapon. Instead, with a pained grunt, he let it clatter to the floor. He took one step into the room, then another, moving to Raxor's side. Wordlessly, he began laying out instruments, prepping for the next patient as if this were just another day in the ward. Raxor swallowed past the sudden tightness in his throat. The human's meaning was clear. They had started this together. They would see it through, Xindi and human, no longer enemies. Maybe, if they were very lucky, the first building blocks of a bridge between their kinds. He met Bruce's eyes once more, shared a moment of silent understanding. Then, as the battle raged outside, they bent together over the operating table and got back to work. The chaos outside the hospital walls crescendoed, then abruptly subsided. Raxor looked up from his patient, meeting Bruce's eyes across the operating table. The human's face was etched with exhaustion, but his gaze held steady. "We need to end this," Raxor said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Too many lives lost already." Bruce nodded, his hands never faltering as he applied pressure to a wounded Xindi soldier's injury. "What do you propose?" Raxor's mind raced. He thought of the Xindi High Council, of their iron grip on policy and their unwavering stance on the war. But he also thought of the humanity he'd witnessed in this room, both from the humans and from his own people. "I'm contacting the council," he declared. "This madness stops now." While Bruce continued triage, Raxor activated the hospital's secure communication channel. His claws flew over the interface, bypassing layers of security until he reached the direct line to the High Council chamber. Counselor Zara's face appeared on the screen, her scales shimmering with agitation. "Dr. Raxor, what is the meaning of this interruption?" Raxor took a deep breath. "Counselor, I implore you to listen. This war, it's based on a lie. The humans are not the savages we believe them to be." He spoke quickly, passionately, describing the resilience he'd witnessed, the compassion shown even to enemy combatants. He told of Bruce's selflessness, of humans and Xindi working side by side to save lives. "If we continue this war, we doom both our species to destruction," Raxor concluded. "Please, Counselor, call for a ceasefire. Give peace a chance." Zara's expression softened as she listened. When Raxor finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then, to his astonishment, she nodded. "You've given me much to consider, Doctor. I will bring this to the council immediately." Hours passed in a blur of surgeries and tense waiting. Then, miraculously, the order came through. A ceasefire had been declared. Peace talks would begin immediately. In the days that followed, Raxor and Bruce found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of diplomacy. They spoke before the combined delegations, sharing their experiences and advocating for cooperation. Bruce's stories of human perseverance and unity struck a chord with many of the Xindi representatives. He spoke of the aftermath of the San Francisco earthquake, of strangers banding together to pull survivors from rubble. He described the global outpouring of aid following the Australian wildfires, nations setting aside differences to combat a common threat. As the talks progressed, Raxer and Bruce presented their proposal for a medical exchange program. By combining our knowledge, we can save countless lives on both sides, Raxer explained, and in doing so, forge bonds that transcend our differences. The council agreed, and soon the hospital was bustling with a mix of human and Xindi medical personnel. Raxer watched with pride as Bruce demonstrated advanced triage techniques to a group of young Xindi doctors. Nearby, a human nurse listened intently as a Xindi surgeon explained the intricacies of their regenerative technology. Late one night, Raxer and Bruce sat in the hospital's small break room, poring over data from their latest xenobiological experiments. Bruce rubbed his eyes, then chuckled softly. "What is it?" Raxer asked. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Bruce replied. "A few weeks ago, we were trying to kill each other. Now look at us." Raxer nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest he was still learning to identify. "Indeed, though I fear not everyone shares our optimism." He thought of the whispers he'd heard, the sideways glances from some of the more conservative Xindi, and of Colonel Varric, whose barely concealed contempt seemed to grow with each passing day. As if summoned by the thought, Varric's voice drifted through the open door. He was speaking to someone in low, urgent tones. "Cannot allow this to continue. The humans will bleed us dry, mark my words. And that traitor Raxer..." Raxer and Bruce exchanged a glance. The human's expression hardened, a glimpse of the soldier beneath the healer. "Looks like we've got more work to do," Bruce said quietly. Raxer nodded, his commitment strengthening. They had come too far to let prejudice and fear undo all they had accomplished. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Xindi and human, united in their quest for a better future. As they turned back to their work, neither could have predicted how soon that tenacity would be tested. The medical exchange program launched with cautious optimism. Human and Xindi doctors crowded the hospital's lecture halls, eagerly sharing knowledge. Raxer watched with pride as a human cardiologist demonstrated a groundbreaking surgical technique to wide-eyed Xindi residents. In the next room, a Xindi biochemist explained the intricacies of their regenerative compounds to attentive human researchers. Bruce threw himself into the exchange, his enthusiasm infectious. "Did you see that neural mapping demo?" he asked Raxer one evening, eyes bright with excitement. "The applications for treating degenerative diseases are incredible." Raxer nodded, allowing himself a small smile. "Indeed, and your people's advancements in prosthetics are equally impressive. Together we could revolutionize..." A commotion in the hallway cut him off. Colonel Varric's voice rang out, sharp with anger. "You give away our secrets so freely? Have you forgotten they were our enemies mere weeks ago?" Raxer and Bruce exchanged a worried glance before hurrying to investigate. They found Varric berating a young Xindi doctor who wilted under the colonel's furious gaze. "Is there a problem, Colonel?" Raxer asked, stepping between them. Varric's eyes narrowed. "The problem, Doctor, is your willful naivety. These humans seek only to steal our technology, to use it against us." "That's not true," Bruce interjected, his voice level despite the tension. "We're here to learn from each other, to save lives." "So you say," Varric sneered, "but I wonder what other knowledge you're collecting while you're here." Before anyone could respond, an ear-splitting boom shook the building. The lights flickered, and acrid smoke filled the air. Screams and the sound of shattering glass echoed from down the hall. "The research lab!" Raxer shouted, already running toward the source of the explosion. Bruce was right behind him, but Varric had vanished in the chaos. They reached the lab to find it in ruins. Equipment lay scattered and sparking, and fires smoldered in the wreckage. A figure lay motionless near the center of the blast zone. "Bruce, no!" Raxor cried, recognizing the human's singed uniform. He rushed to his friend's side, assessing the damage with growing horror. Bruce's pulse was weak and erratic, his breathing labored. As Xindi and human medical staff converged on the scene, accusations flew. "It was one of yours!" a human nurse shouted. "I saw a Xindi in here just before..." Lies, a Zindi orderly retorted. The humans must have sabotaged. Enough, Raxor roared, silencing them all. Right now, we focus on saving lives. Get him to the OR, now. Hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Bruce's condition deteriorated despite their best efforts. Raxor watched the monitors with growing despair as his friend's vital signs weakened. We're losing him, a human doctor said, defeat in her voice. No, Raxor growled. Not like this? His mind raced, piecing together fragments of human and Zindi medical knowledge. It was risky, untested, but... Clear the room, he ordered. I need space. Working swiftly, Raxor prepared a cocktail of Zindi regenerative compounds. He calibrated the human defibrillator, adjusting it to frequencies never before attempted. As Bruce flatlined, Raxor plunged the syringe into his chest. Come on, my friend, he whispered, activating the defibrillator. Fight! For agonizing seconds, nothing happened. Then, miraculously, a faint blip appeared on the monitor. It strengthened, stabilized. Bruce's eyes fluttered open. Did we win? He croaked weakly. Raxor let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. We're still fighting, but yes, I think we did. As Bruce recovered, Raxor turned his attention to the explosion's cause. The evidence, once he knew where to look, was damning. Security footage, cleverly altered, but not quite perfectly. Trace chemicals found only in Zindi military-grade explosives. And at the center of it all, Colonel Varick's digital fingerprints. Raxor and Bruce confronted Varick in his office, presenting their findings. The colonel's scales flushed with rage. You understand nothing, Varick snarled, drawing his sidearm. I am protecting our people from your foolishness. By murdering innocents? Bruce asked, his voice hard. That's not protection, it's cowardice. Varick's finger tightened on the trigger. Then I'll eliminate you both, for the good of... The door burst open. Counselor Zara strode in, flanked by Zindi security forces. Stand down, Colonel, she ordered. You're under arrest for treason against the Zindi people. As Varick was led away in restraints, Zara turned to Raxor and Bruce. Your warning was timely, Doctor. We've been monitoring Varick's communications. It seems he's not the only one who opposes this alliance. Raxor nodded grimly. Then our work is not nearly finished. But we've come too far to give up now, Bruce added, dedication etched on his face. Zara studied them both, then smiled faintly. Perhaps there is hope for us yet. Come, we have much to discuss about the future of our peoples. As they followed her out, Raxor caught Bruce's eye. No words were needed. They had weathered this storm together, and they would face whatever came next the same way, united in their quest for understanding between their kinds. The fragile peace shattered like glass. Plasma bombs tore through the medical facility, their searing heat melting steel and flesh alike. Raxor stumbled through smoke-filled corridors, his scales blistering from the intense heat. Screams echoed from every direction as he desperately searched for survivors. Bruce, he called, his voice barely audible over the roar of flames and crumbling infrastructure. Where are you? A faint groan caught his attention. Raxor clawed his way through a pile of rubble to find Bruce pinned beneath a fallen ceiling beam. The human's body was a mess of burns and broken bones, but his eyes still held a flicker of life. Hold on, my friend, Raxor said, assessing the damage. I'll get you out of here. With no access to proper medical equipment, Raxor improvised. He cobbled together a makeshift trauma kit from scattered Zindi medpacks and human supplies. As he worked to stabilize Bruce's injuries, another explosion rocked the building. Realization struck Raxor like a physical blow. This was no accident, he muttered. They're targeting us specifically. Bruce coughed, blood speckling his lips. The hardliners? Raxor nodded grimly. We've become too dangerous to their agenda. With Bruce's condition critical and no safe path to the triage unit, Raxor made a desperate decision. He activated an ancient Zindi medical transit system, praying it still functioned after centuries of disuse. This will hurt, he warned Bruce, but it's our only chance. The transit beam enveloped them. tearing apart their molecules and reassembling them in a hidden, subterranean safe house. The process stabilized Bruce's worst injuries, but left Raxor reeling from the strain. As Bruce lay unconscious on a makeshift cot, Raxor felt his own life force ebbing away. Internal damage too severe to treat. His time was limited. With trembling claws, Raxor initiated a consciousness link. He poured his vast medical knowledge directly into Bruce's mind, human and Xindi techniques intertwining in a flood of information. "You must live," Raxor whispered, his vision dimming. "Complete our work. Show them a better way." In his final moments, Raxor saw visions of a future where humans and Xindi stood united against the darkness of the universe. He smiled, content in knowing he had played a part in that possibility. "I'm sorry, my friend," Raxor said to the unconscious Bruce. "The rest is up to you now." Raxor's eyes closed for the last time, his body going still. Hours later, Bruce awoke with a gasp. His mind reeled from the influx of alien knowledge, while his body ached with partially healed wounds. He found himself alone in the sterile confines of the safe house, surrounded by unfamiliar Xindi technology. The weight of responsibility settled on Bruce's shoulders as he realized what Raxor had done. He looked at his battered hands, now holding the key to bridging their two species. "I won't let your sacrifice be in vain," Bruce vowed, his voice echoing in the empty chamber. He rose unsteadily, wincing at the pain that lanced through his body. The safe house's computer banks hummed to life at his touch, revealing schematics and supply inventories. Bruce's newly acquired Xindi knowledge allowed him to decipher the alien text with ease. "First things first," he muttered, searching for a communication array. "We need to find out who's still with us." As Bruce worked to establish contact with any surviving allies, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The extremists would stop at nothing to derail the peace process. And now, with Raxor gone, the burden of uniting their species fell squarely on his shoulders. Bruce's fingers flew over the alien controls, sending out encrypted messages to the few moderates he knew he could trust. It would take time to rebuild, to prove that cooperation was still possible. But he would not rest until Raxor's dream became a reality. Outside the safe house, the world burned. But within its walls, a spark of hope remained alive.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.